Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We'll take a few minutes to get everybody in the room. The chat is open if you'd like to let us know where you are connecting from. And very, very warm welcome to all of you this afternoon. I think it's going to be a really interesting session and we're very grateful to have the panelists that we have on today's call. So we will get going in just a couple of minutes. Let us know where you're connecting from in the chat in the meantime. Teddy, yes, I'm also in Cape Town and it's a very windy day. Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, we're just giving it a couple of minutes to get everybody in the room. Let us know where you're connecting from in the chat, and thank you very much for joining us. Right, I think it's time for us to get going. We are also recording the session, so we will make sure that everybody who is registered to attend the webinar has access to the recording as well. Good afternoon and welcome to this Tourism Business Council of South Africa webinar. We are very grateful today to have representatives from the Department of Home Affairs and the Department of Transport who will be giving us some feedback this afternoon. But before we introduce our delegates, I'd like to hand over to the Tourism Business Council of South Africa CEO, Chifiwa Chivengwa, just to give us a quick welcome. Chief, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalia, and good afternoon to everyone. And thank you, Natalia, for hosting us. We have organized this feedback session on the backdrop of the conference that we did in Sun City in September, where we discussed various issues that are critical for the tourism industry and that are critical for the recovery of our industry after the 2.5 years of the pandemic, and also now that we're recovering, we do know that we still have some challenges. So we wanted to discuss the obstacles or the challenges that we need to be dealing with in order for us to recover faster within the tourism sector. And at that conference, we discussed various issues and we came up with various resolutions in terms of what are the things that we need to deal with. But those resolutions were on the basis of the new revised targets that we have set for ourselves for 2030. You would have known that the target for 2030 pre-COVID was 21 million tourists coming into South Africa by 2030. Because of COVID, we revised that target down to 15.6 million. And of course, we needed to also stimulate domestic leisure, travel, and sports travel by 2030. And we discuss issues that are obstacles to growth, and these issues are known to all of us. These are the issues of, amongst others, issues of safety and security, access and visa, issues of transport and infrastructure there too, issues around awareness, education, skills, and innovation, issues around investment and product development, and of course, issues around marketing and how do we market ourselves, both domestic and internationally, issues around events, and of course, collaboration between ourselves as a private sector and the public sector, and of course, establishing that trust between ourselves. And amongst all, issues around transformation, inclusivity, and sustainability. And we discussed these issues and we said, if we are able to solve some of these issues, we should be able, to move a dial in terms of the work that we are doing as a tourism sector. And therefore, what we are doing today is to start the feedback sessions that we have promised when we were at the conference. We did say that we will come back to yourselves and the industry at large, and we will be able to give feedback pertaining the resolutions that have been taken, instead of us waiting for the next conference to happen for us to give feedback, because we are in a fluid situation and some of these issues are urgent. They need to be dealt with as a matter of urgency and ensure that we remove whatever is there and we ensure that there is real recovery within the tourism sector. And of course, we are recovering from the inbound and also from the domestic point of view, and as well as the events and conferencing like we have seen. So this is the first session that we are having that will deal with two issues, and it will deal with issues of that pertains to Home Affairs. These are the issues that have to do with the e-visas, the ease of access for tourists to come to South Africa, and the work that's being done by the Department of Home Affairs to that effect. At the conference, the DG of Home Affairs did come and they did made a presentation, and he did announce some few things that were happening. Today, we'll get some more feedback on what work has been done and what direction it's taking. The second part of this is to deal with issues of transport, which will be addressed by the Department of Transport on the issues of operating permits and the work that has been done up to date. I must say that we as the TBCSA, including all our affiliate members, have been hard at work to ensure that we solve the situation at hand and to ensure that we provide some relief to the industry. So that work will continue, but we will get feedback from Department of Transport. And after the feedback, even tomorrow, the work will continue until such time that we get into a state where we can say the challenges that we have been resolved. So this webinar is about that. We will have more webinars as time goes to give feedback on other resolutions that we have taken in terms of what we're doing. There are certain things that have happened since the seminar, since the conference up to now. Issues of safety and security that we have dealt with and we are still dealing with, and many other issues, that impacts on the tourism industry. But today we'll focus on those two issues as part of the feedback session. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. I'm going to hand over to our chair, Blackie Kumani, just for a few words of welcome. Blackie, over to you.
Thank you, Natalia, and thank you, CEO. Colleagues from the industry. I see that some of my colleagues from the TBCSA board are online. My deputy chair, Jerry, I saw that he has just joined, and some other colleagues on the board of TBCSA. But I think for me, more importantly, having the members of our partnership in the government, being Department of Transport, represented by NOMSA, Chwene, and Department of Home Affairs, represented by Yusuf Simon. I think, as the CEO said, this is a continuation of the conference we had, which was quite a great success. We didn't want to have a talk show. We wanted to have a conference that will deliver results And part of those results is to prioritize. And the CEO mentioned that out of the 5 key obstacles or issues that we identified there, we decided to zone in and hone in on 2, which is the e-visa situation as well as NPTR. Hence, we have our partners from the government. So truly for me is to appreciate the participation of the industry and also the participation of our members in this session. I'd like to hand over back to you, Natalia, and hopefully out of this we can keep on moving forward, colleagues, because come 2023, the president is going to make an announcement. Sorry, there's construction behind me if you're hearing some noise. We don't want the president to go to SONA and make another announcement without sharing successes. So our drive is to say here the obstacles that the president identified, we've achieved them, and hence I'm so happy to have our 2 colleagues from the 2 departments. But thank you so much, Natalia, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I could hear the construction, but hopefully they're building something amazing in the background and it will all be over soon because I know there's nothing worse. Thank you, everybody. I can see we've had a few questions come into the chat already, and I'm going to ask you a big favor because I'm going to be manning the Q&A and I won't be able to flick between your chat and your Q&A. If you do have a question for any of our panelists, please do add that to the Q&A folder for me, not the chat, so that I can make sure that it is directed properly, and also to confine your questions to those that are related to the Department of Home Affairs and those that are related to the Department of Transport, because that is the representation that we have today on our panel. Anything that does not fit in the ambit of DHA and DOT, you can put in the Q&A folder and we can potentially look at following up for you. But our panelists today will not be able to respond to those questions because that's not their wheelhouse. They're not in that department. So the Q&A folder at the bottom of the screen, please. First to join me today, I'm very pleased to have the Department of Home Affairs Acting DDG for Immigration Services, Yusuf Simons. He will be joining us today to take us through a presentation. Yusuf, I'm going to share your presentation and then the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. As I was introduced, my name is Yusuf Simons from the Department of Home Affairs in the environment of immigration. CEO and Chair, I heard your opening remarks, and I'll come and zoom into the feedback from the previous resolutions pertaining to the e-visa enhancements and what's been happening in that particular space. But I put a presentation together just to bring in some other developments that's been happening in Home Affairs Department since August, I think. So I'll just briefly go through that and zoom into the areas of e-visas when we get there, particularly the areas impacting on tourism. Can we go to the next slide, please? The purpose is exactly, I'm going to talk about some of the critical skills visas that we are processing, because that's got a major impact for the country. Some of the new developments, the chair spoke about the State of the Nation address. During the State of the Nation address, the president announced that we'll have a visa review task team, and they've made some recommendations, particularly towards the remote working visa and the startup visa, which also has some links with the tourism industry, and then of course some of the tourist visas and what we are doing in that regard. The next slide speaks about the mandate of Home Affairs. I'm not going to spend too much on that, but it's my duty as official from Home Affairs always to remind the participants that Home Affairs is responsible in particularly the immigration component to facilitate and regulate the secure movement of persons through the ports of entry is to confirm enabling documents for those who want to reside illegally in the country, to enforce immigration legislation, to determine asylum status and refugee status, and of course, most importantly, is to contribute towards realizing a positive skills migration trend into South Africa. So the legal enablement or framework that we work in is the Immigration Act and the Refugees Act. The next slide speaks about particularly the critical skills. Now, the last critical skills we published as a Department of Home Affairs was responsible for that was in 2014, exactly 8 years ago. Critical skills list needs to be published every 4 years. So this one is now a new critical skills list to attract those vital skills into the country. And we have had engagements with the Department of Higher Education and Training, who's our partner in this regard. The DHET provides us with an important part, that is, they do a technical report, they do surveys, they do studies, and they use the UCT environment or researchers to assist with that. And they submitted their report to us in November 2020. The closing date for public comments was in February, and then again in the 31st of March. From there, the first critical skills list 2022 was published in the 2nd of February this year. But then we had an outcry. We had petition to the department, and with particularly from the health professionals. And then the minister published an amendment, which was published on the 2nd of August 2022, to bring in health professions, particularly nurses, not general nursing staff, but nurses in the ICU units, high care units, etc., where there was a real skills gap there. So just some statistics for the current 2022-23 performance year. The department has already processed 3,182 critical skills visas, and close to 1,013 permanent resident applications based on critical skills. The next slide speaks about the remote working visa and the startup visa. Now, these are two new recommendations, and those on the webinar, we'll probably hear more about it in the State of the Nation address of the President come February 2023. As indicated, the President appointed a task team to look at the review of the visa regime, particularly in terms of work visa requirements, including the remote working visa and a startup visa for companies. Now, this report and the project was led by ex-Home Affairs. I think it was also one of the chairpersons during the session you had in Sun City, Mr. Mavuso Msimang. Is the leader of this Vulundlela team, and he presented his report actually on Tuesday, which was yesterday. Yeah, he presented his report to the Minister of Home Affairs and to the Deputy Minister and the Executive. So they have finalized the report, and they have made recommendations, particularly on the startup and remote working visa. A remote working visa is a visa class that allows workers employed anywhere in the world who can work remotely from South Africa. So you might have a job in everywhere in the world, but your base working remotely can be in South Africa. That is one of the recommendations. Second recommendation on a new visa category, which we doesn't have currently, is what's called a startup visa. Is a visa class that identifies entrepreneurs with high potential business skills that can scale quickly, they can upscale quickly. This will be for particular sectors, which the detail of that is what we are working on now as a department. But these visas can be issued to entrepreneurs, which meets the criteria, as I indicated, for high growth startup businesses for the first 5 years of operation to create jobs and to attract probably more visitors to the country. So these are the recommendations. It will certainly require the Department of Home Affairs to look at our regulations, our Immigration Act, to see how we can, the parameters that we need to include for these two particular visa categories. And that's work that we are currently doing. You can also see that right at the bottom is that we are starting a process of reviewing all our visa categories as legislated. Over the years, our visa categories has expanded to such extent that we have about 17 different visa categories. It's probably the most than any country in the world. So we need to look at that and how do we streamline those visa categories, seeing that two new visa categories in the remote visa and the startup visa has also been recommended. And that's work that will continue. The next slide is now, let me zoom into our contribution as a Department of Home Affairs towards tourism. And the first part is just to look at statistics. And I've heard earlier statistics from the CEO, but this is statistics from our entry into South Africa over the last 5 years. And as you can see from this, there's been average statistics in 2018, 2019 is 40 million travelers into South Africa. That includes South Africans, by the way. As you can see, the effect that COVID had in 2020, it dropped to 5,000. 2021 has picked up to 9,000, and this year up to now, we've had 13,500,000 travelers entering the country. Most of them are from the land borders. That is about 70% are traveling through land. Aviation by air the rest is 31 million, and then the smaller portion is through the maritime, the harbors. So 20% through 27% through aviation, the airports, and 70% coming through land ports. As you can see, the impact is clearly visible from these slides on the number of the statistics in terms of travelers into the country. The next slide is now dealing with the tourism and focusing more on that and what we term inclusive tourism. And the Department of Home Affairs is committed to inclusive tourism. This is about reducing the uncertainty around what to expect from a destination and offer a positive travel experience. We are committed to that. We are one of the key mechanisms we are using is the visa exemption list, and we are regularly reviewing the visa exemption list. Currently, we have 148 countries that have a visa agreement with South Africa. 2 additional countries, and this is quite recent, Chair, that's happened since the session you had in Sun City, is that the president announced that we'll have a visa agreement with Kenya starting from 1 January next year. That's for ordinary passport holders also, as well as Lithuania. The Lithuania visa agreement is for official and diplomatic passport holders only. That one takes effect on the 14th of December this year. But continuously, Chair, we have multiple engagements on binational level, different countries on visa waiver requests that we receive all over the world. So these 2 countries and countries I identified as 148 can enter South Africa for 30 up to 90 days without having to obtain a visa. The rollout of the e-visa system, that's a fundamental change for us as well to streamline and modernize the process of application, is one area that I know is a topical point that we can zoom in now in the next 2 slides. First, this slide, Chair, just indicates in green, indicates countries that does not require a visa to come to South Africa. Now, this is the map of the world. So you can see there's mostly greens there. So those countries, you do not require a visa. If you're a tourist, you want to come to South Africa, you do not require a visa. The ones in red are the ones that require a visa. And the ones in yellow or orange, depending on your eyesight, are the ones that we're currently negotiating visa agreements with. So this map constantly changes as we move along. But as I indicated before, we have regular engagements with different countries, and up to now, I think there's about 8 or 9 countries that we are currently having binational discussions on visa waivers. The next slide then deals with the e-visa. So Chair, just a summary on the e-visa before I go to developments in the e-visa space and feedback since the last time the DG presented on the e-visa. So as we know, Chair, and probably those on the webinar knows as well, and has been recorded quite widely, is that we launched the e-visa system in 2021 to 14 countries, including China, the big countries, China, India, Kenya, and Nigeria. The rollout of the e-visa system is to modernize the e-visa process to make it easier for travelers to come into the country. You can see, Chair, that the presentation will always mention tourism, business, and work. But we started with tourism. So the e-visa platform that we currently have is only for visitors to South Africa. It has not yet been scaled up to business and work. But in the new financial year, we will certainly scale that up to include applications for business-related visas and investment-related visas, probably the critical skills visa as well as the general work visas. So as I indicated, it's aiming to make the immigration process fluid and also to amplify border security checks, because the e-visa platform is integrated with our risk engines, with our stop lists, with the SAPS list, with the Interpol list, with the movement control list, etc. So it brings a more fluid, more secure process to the fore. And it allows, the last bullet, Chair, it allows prospective visitors to apply for a visa from the comfort of his or her home online without having to go to a mission. It's for us also more secure, Chair. There's no doubt. It's online, and the process, the payment process is also more secure. But also, Chair, when you have electronic visa, it's easier to control security-wise, because as we know, anything on paper, nowadays, there are fraudsters who are eagerly looking at these paper documents and try to fraud them. The next and the last slide, Chair, just speaks to the process involved when a traveler arrives, presents the authorization to the immigration officer. So once the e-visa is approved, Chair, an email is sent to the applicant, and the applicant then shows that authorization. The system is also updated. We are looking at expanding this e-visa system, Chair. But let me then speak to enhancements to this, because this is the theory about the e-visa system. As indicated, and probably as DG alluded to in the previous discussions, we had experienced problems with the e-visa system, and we still have. And in September this year, the department launched a pilot parallel e-visa system. We tested the e-visa system with Nigeria, which is also going well at the moment. There's no backlogs on that system, because we wanted to learn lessons from a different e-visa system to enhance the Home Affairs e-visa system. So what has since happened, Chair, we have implemented some enhancements. There's a full-time team looking at these, IT team at the enhancements, what we call change requests. Change requests not only in the application process, Chair, because if you go to the e-visa portal and you access the application, you will see it's a lengthy application form, and it asks for a number of supporting documents. Now, we have identified the enhancements to that, but enhancements doesn't happen overnight, Chair. So enhancements have been identified for the application process, but also enhancements for the adjudication process. Currently, you need 2 officials. A third one is required if the 2 adjudicators don't agree. So basically 3 officials to adjudicate 1 application. So the change that's coming before the end of this month, probably the first week of December, is that adjudication process will change to 1 official only because it's a visitor category, which will then triple our resources that we currently have dealing with the e-visa applications. Chair. In terms of a capacity as well, maybe the members on the webinar have seen the adverts from Home Affairs to appoint 16 adjudicators. And these adjudicators are now legally qualified persons. We changed the criteria for adjudicator because one of the lessons we learned, Chair, is that the quality of the decisions need to be improved. And because we work in a legal framework, it's important that we have adjudicators that understand the legal imperative, the legal framework, so that we make correct decisions. Often we are accused of rejecting applications that we should not have. So the adjudicators, the shortlisting is finishing today. So in the middle of December, we'll have appointed these 16 adjudicators. And they will be dedicated also to the e-visa platform. Because as I indicated before, Chair, we want to upscale the e-visa platform, not only to deal with visitors, but also in the new financial year to deal with other categories. Most probably we'll start with critical skills and we'll identify certain categories. But for example, the e-visa, the 14 countries can also be upscaled to include other countries. One of the discussions we had, Chair, and this is not in the presentation, but with Romania, for example, we know that the office in Bucharest has closed by DIRCO, Department of International Relations, and the applicants there have been told to go to Hungary and submit an application there. We have met with the ambassador of Romania, and one of the proposals is that we include Romania also as part of the platform for the e-visa, as also to have our facilitation center, the VFS, to assist us in Romania. I'm sure there's going to be more questions on that, Chair, but that is what we are trying to aim, what we're trying to do in countries that's currently struggling to access visas. Then, Chair, I think one of the most significant ones on the e-visa is that we've secured 2 weeks ago a space for what we call the e-visa hub. And why it's significant, Chair, it's the space is secured in our production IT hub. Now, our production site for Home Affairs is where our IT technicians sit and they run the systems of Home Affairs. So the e-visa hub is moving to the production site so that their enhancements, as I indicated, and the change requests to improve the system can be done right there on site. Our adjudicators can identify errors that we have on the system. And because we're in a production site, in a live environment with our IT team, we can do these enhancements and improvements to the system much quicker. That's why I'm also confident that the upscaling to different type of visas, not only visitors for tourists, etc., but also looking at the economy, critical skills, etc., is what we will do in the new financial year. Chair, let me stop at that point, and I'm open for questions. Thank you very much for everyone listening.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. We do have quite a few questions that have come through. And if you do have a question, please feel free to add that to the Q&A folder for us, and I will run through it there. Okay, so the question around the e-visa, and we appreciate the fact that you're going to put more human resources into the e-visa application system. But I think the question is, really, are there any plans to change that system to full online approvals? Because, you know, it still requires intervention by staff in Home Affairs, which results in a longer turnaround. So are there any plans to change that system to fully online approvals in terms of best practice e-visa elsewhere in the world, or not really? Would you like me to pose them one by one, or are you going to respond to all of them at the end, Yusuf?
Can you give me 3 at a time, please?
Aha, okay, no problem at all. How big is the backlog of e-visas, And when will this backlog be cleared? And then a question that did come in the chat: what is next after Mr. Msimang's recommendations? What are the next steps and envisaged timelines for the process to be concluded, followed by implementation?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good questions. The first one, the online adjudication, Chair, the human intervention, the process we have now, and I mentioned earlier that we work in a legal framework. So there are certain requirements that you have to submit. And one of the due diligence that's very important for us is to verify documents. There's a lot of fraudulent documents submitted. So if you submit a bank statement, for example, we are not so advanced yet to have an online approval of that bank statements, because it's only the bank who can then verify whether it's a genuine bank statement and the money is really there. So for now, we still have human intervention, Chair, because of the due diligence and the adjudication process that we currently have and the frameworks that we're working in. Very importantly, actually, is that in the Vulundlela report from Mr. Msimang, there's a proposal to automate the systems of Home Affairs. And when it was presented to Minister in that regard, we all were very excited because we've been having challenges. You know what Home Affairs is, challenges with offline systems being offline, etc. And because we have to work through the government information agency called SITA, we are reliant on them. And so the minister also requested this Vulundlela team, who has direct access to the president, to raise this issue of automation of systems. Because even in foreign missions, those applications are all manual. It's not integrated with our systems that we have here locally. So we are still far behind the modernization and automation of systems that we have. So ideally, we need to be there. So in the absence of that, we need to then speed up the adjudication process and speed up the quality and improve on the quality of decisions. So that's where we are now. A good intention is to have fully online approvals in the future. And maybe when we look at other visa categories, one of the proposals that we're also looking at is what we call trusted employer, which was also supported by Mr. Msimang's team, is that a person who's coming to work here, the responsibility should rest with, not with that particular person, but the organization, employer of that particular person. Many countries does it that way, that foreigners do not apply by themselves. The person who invites them applies, or the employer employs them applies on their behalf. So it's part of the trusted employer scheme that we're also looking at. That's part of the recommendations there. So fully online approvals, not yet, but priority, improve our human intervention in adjudication. The next one on the backlog. 2 weeks ago, we had a backlog on the e-visa of about 6,900 on the e-visa system. But 787 of them, I know it exactly because I had to go to our exco and explain that. 787 were current applications, which means that the travel is still lying ahead, which means that those e-visas is for us a priority because the travel must still take place. So the 5,820 or so were applications that the travel have already passed. So those applications were finalized. Now the priority is on the 787. Now the team has indicated by the end of next week, we will be on par and have no more backlogs when it comes to the e-visa. What will clearly assist is if we change the adjudication process, Chair, because mathematics is clear. If you currently need 3 persons to do one adjudication, one application, and we've changed that to say 1 person, 1 application. So your production increases 3-fold. And that by next week we'll have that change in our e-visa system, which we are very confident that that won't result in backlogs again. So that is the big change that we are doing here, and it's all been approved. Just the IT system needs to change in that regard. Then what's next in terms of Lundlela report? The final page is that Mr. Msimang presented is that Home Affairs must submit the implementation plan before the State of the Nation address, which is in February 2023, somewhere there. So that's our timeframes. But as I indicated before as well, it gives us a good opportunity to look at these two new visa categories proposed, remote working visa and the startup visa, and look at these 17 categories that we have, because there's no country that can have 19 categories of visas. For example, retirement visa, it's a temporary visa for 2 years. So we're looking at that and saying, but can the person retire for 2 years? Is retirement not something that once you reach retirement, you should retire? So these are some of the matters that we are looking at in the different visa categories. So the next step for us is on the 1st of December, we are sitting to look at the review of our visa regime and to look at the report from Lundlela. We then meet with, after that, we'll take it to our executive and our approving authorities. And then in December, we'll sit with the team of Mr. Msimang. Because the implementation team of their recommendations, we can't sit as Home Affairs alone. You need to sit with the drafters, because they've done a lot of research and benchmarking, etc. So that will happen in probably by January. We'll have the implementation plan with timeframes, etc. And we're also looking at quick wins that they have proposed on some of the requirements. There's been years since the Immigration Act of 2002. Are they still relevant? And those are the questions we're asking. The police clearance certificate, for example, for the time periods that we're saying, for every year that whichever country we're in, you need to submit, it's becoming onerous on applicants. The radiology reports, the medical reports, some countries, you submit a medical report, for example, after it's been approved. Now, we requested beforehand. So whether it's approved or not, you have to submit it. So we're just asking ourselves, are some of these documents and the requirements still relevant? And on the 1st of December, we're really opening ourselves up to review our requirements, review the regulations, and see how we can fast track some of these changes without having to change the policy, the act. Because to change an act, CEO and Chair, needs to go through Parliament, different houses of Parliament. It's a lengthy process. But to do a change in the regulations, we can do it internally in the Department of Home Affairs. So that is what we are looking at currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. I'll take you back to that wonderful map, actually. Thank you so much for that resource, which plots the green, the red, and the amber. I did see amber, not yellow, be glad to say. And some of the questions that we have received are kind of around the selection of those red countries, if you will. Leanne in the chat has spoken about many of the visa red countries being in Africa. I've had a few questions around Romania, for example, the likes of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Croatia. They're all part of the EU, but they're kind of in the red zone, and we're just trying to understand why that is the case, and if there are any discussions or plans to change those red countries into green, amber countries, because those are key source markets for us, and not having visa accessibility is hampering that inbound tourism from those particular countries. So how do you decide who's going to be red, who's going to be amber, and what plans are there to change those that are red, that are, for example, European Union countries and candidate countries for the Schengen Agreement?
Thanks. When it comes to international engagements, South Africa is led by the department, as I said, DIRCO, Department of International Relations. So there would be what they call note verbals from different countries, either from us to certain countries or from countries to us, requesting that we have meetings where we can discuss visa requirements or visa waiver possibilities. In the last month, I think I've been to 2 countries discussing visa waiver issues, etc. One of the key considerations and the key role players are the security cluster departments, as Department of DIRCO, the SSA, who will give us a security report. We look at tourism department, ourselves as well, looking at the prevalence of the nationals traveling to South Africa, the prevalence of nationals becoming illegal in the country, deportations, etc. So we're looking at opportunities, but we're looking also at the security analysis reports, etc. And we have these engagements before we go abroad and have these discussions. And normally what happens is a visa waiver is not signed on the first meeting. You normally have a cooperation agreement, a memorandum of understanding that you say that for us to consider and get to a visa waiver, there's certain processes to follow. The senior officials will then meet over a certain period of time. Like, for example, the Kenya visa waiver, I think we engaged for about 2 years on that. Senior officials, we then put our requirements there in terms of security issues, in terms of their processes in how they manage their passports, for example, their civil registration, etc. Do they have a civil registration process? The key question is, a person carrying your passport, is that passport really issued by your country? Do you have systems, automated systems that secure your supporting documents? I'm just touching on some of those elements that we look at when we do have discussions on visa waiver. On the African continent, for example, SADC, you'll see almost all of SADC has a visa waiver agreement with South Africa. So when we do these discussions, we look at that and we set ourselves timeframes. So some of the countries that's in red doesn't mean that we have said no to them forever. There might already have been a process started moving towards that. Our first point of start would always be diplomatic and official passport holders, to ensure that the continuous engagements between the 2 countries can continue. Until and afterwards, we look at ordinary passport holders. But it's really a process that we go through, because on the one hand, we have tourism, on the other hand, we have security state departments that also advises us. Thank you.
Can I just ask then, this is a bit of a selfish question because it's my question. So if we have tourism and we have security on either side of the coin, who initiates that? So does tourism come to you and say, we have a massive source market in terms of, I don't know, Romania, for example, we need you, Department of Home Affairs, to start that process? Do they go to the security cluster? What is the chain of events? Because there are source markets we are wanting to unlock. Who nudges?
We have a security cluster, yes. We have regular engagements all the time. I'm sure you're familiar with the different forums and structures in government. So we have continuous engagements. Just next week, if I look at my diary now, next week, the Nigerians are here. And so we have a 3-day discussion. The week after that, it's another country. And so it goes on and on and on.
Okay.
We are led by DIRCO, as I indicated, international relations. They bring us together. We then have senior officials meetings. We have cluster meetings, forum meetings. And so we have those type of engagements.
Okay. All right. So a few more questions for you. And then I think we're going to hand over to Nomsa because we have monopolized your time, Yusuf. So the first question is from Peter, and he said, to date, how many e-visas have been successfully processed? We are not aware of a single successful application from India, which is a key source market and identified as one of the countries the e-visa is supposed to be operational in. So that's one question. The second question is from Aaron. While we applaud the e-visa initiative, could Yusuf please elaborate on how long it takes for the e-visas to be approved? What are the applicable costs now that the VFS is no longer necessary? And then the third question is from Marissa, who wants to know what happened to the 5,820 visas whose travel has passed. Were these people not allowed in the country? Over to you, Yusuf.
Thanks. I see my colleague Yogi Travan has also joined. But let me start with, let me say definitely we have approved e-visas over the years since it's been implemented. I just don't have the exact statistics for you now. Definitely we have approved e-visas for India. I think just yesterday or the day before, I had a query from somebody who needed to travel by Friday, and he applied for the e-visa, and we assisted him. So I just do not have the stats, but I can forward that stats to the Business Council to say, this is the stats, number of applications received, number of applications approved, number of applications rejected as well. We have that information. In terms of the cost that we require on the e-visa is just the service fee. It's the cost to apply for the visa. There's no service fee, sorry, it's the cost of the visa. So with VFS there, you'd have to pay a service fee and then the cost of the visa. Without VFS, it's just the cost of the visa. So that. On the 5,820, doesn't mean those people did not travel, because you could still go to your embassy or mission and apply for a tourist visa or visitor's visa there in those. But those applications will be rejected because the period of travel has already passed. So it doesn't help you because the visa is issued for a particular time period. So it doesn't help you to approve a visa for August because there's no relevance. The time period for travel is already gone. So just to emphasize, doesn't mean those people did not travel, because they could still have gone to the mission to apply, and the missions issues those within 5 days. And that's the turnaround time for the e-visa as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Yusuf. Chief, would you like to add anything before we let Yusuf go?
Thank you, Yusuf. Just the final few things before you go. I think the remote working visa is something that we've been talking about for quite some time now. We talked about this during COVID, and we sent a motivation to Home Affairs then with your predecessor in terms of the remote working visa. I'm glad to see that there is some progress on the remote working visa, something that the industry has been calling for. On the issue of critical skills visa, I think we definitely need to have a bit of further discussion when it comes to the critical skills that are needed within the tourism industry, especially in the guiding space, the foreign languages that we don't have in South Africa. We don't have people who speak those foreign languages who can guide the tours here in South Africa. So it's something that we perhaps need to finalize. You also spoke about the trusted employer program that has been recommended in terms of the employers taking the responsibility of the person that they send into the country. Now the question there, and I'm referring here to, we still have countries that are not on the e-visa system. They are still using the VFS as an application channel going into the mission. Now we have two parallel processes. We have the e-visa, we have the VFS process. Question one, when are we going to do away with the VFS so that we can have one platform, so that we can have the speed that we need to approve and adjudicate? Because if they go to the mission still has the delays and everything that has to do with it. Number two, with countries like Romania, where the embassy have closed and people have to now go to places like Hungary to apply, which means, and they have to apply in person, which means that in that particular market, we are losing groups that wanted to come. They're choosing a different destination. Can we then apply the same principles that you have mentioned about the trusted employer? We have the trusted operators who can then apply for these groups that are coming as one measure to make sure that those that are coming in groups are able to apply instead of going in person individually, to another country to apply. Can we implement, or can we look at implementing the trusted employer the same way we're implementing can we implement the trusted operator the same way we're implementing the trusted employer to handle, these types of applications? So those are, the questions around. And I think there is also one part that was asked about how long does it take for the e-visa to be approved currently, and how long will it take when you hire more people, and also when you have one adjudicator per one application. How is that going to improve efficiency, and by how much time? Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Let me start with the critical skills list. I indicated that we published the critical skills list in February this year. And then we received the input from the health professions, and we did an addendum in August, which is 6 months later. So nothing prevents the sector to submit the input to the minister, requesting that one of the recommendations also from the, let's call it Vundlela report, is that the critical skills list must be updated not every 4 years, but every 2 years, because the industries are fast changing and the skills requirements might change more frequently than we think. So when we had a discussion before the meeting, CEO, we said that some of the issues that you're going to raise here might be policy related. This is exactly one of the issues we're going to discuss on the 1st of December, is to say how frequently do we update the critical skills list? Because as I indicated before, the Department of Higher Education and Training does the research, the surveys, have to go to NEDLAC. The process involved almost like 2 years to develop a critical skills list. So you might just have finalized the process now, and then you have to restart the process again of doing surveys and consultations, etc. But the one thing that is there is, if we get an input to the Minister of Home Affairs and say, consider this sector to be placed on the critical skills list, the minister has the authority to do an amendment to the critical skills list. I think that is open. So you could do that. And my recommendation is put it in there and identify why is that a critical skill that's not available within the country. And that is certainly something that we can look at. Secondly, on VFS, yes, Chair, the e-visa platform, like all other countries are doing it. It's just that we piloted and started as a country last year. Needed to be upscaled for all visa categories. If the intention is that if all visa categories are available on the e-visa, you don't need to go to a mission out there. Currently, we have 48 officials placed in foreign missions all over the world. And it's very costly to keep a person abroad for 4 years, a person with a family. So what we rely on, where we don't have officials, is VFS to take in the applications and take it to the missions. That's the current system we have. To get there, Chair, CEO, as you indicated, is a process, and we really need to upscale and look at the use of the e-visa system. Because it's only when you can have a fully rolled out e-visa system that you can talk about that particular area. So as we upscale, we can then have a less reliance on VFS in certain countries. But you do it country by country, for example. The e-visa that we have with Nigeria, for example, is just a pilot that we're doing with Nigeria. So, for example, if we go critical skills and we go either China or India or one of the countries that have a high impact on economic growth, we can then look at the role of VFS that side. But it's still a process that we have to go through to get to that point eventually. On Romania, as a trusted operator, and I see you are very fast, CEO, because you're using the opportunity of the trusted employer scheme. So when we look at that on, yeah, congratulations, well done. So when we look at the trusted employer scheme on the 1st of December, when the teams sit together, we look at the parameters, as I indicated, is what are the areas that we need to identify to employers to say that you will be held accountable. We will issue you with a work visa. But these are the accountabilities and responsibilities that you will face. If this person becomes illegal in the country or doesn't comply with visa conditions, etc., etc. So we can certainly, and I will bring that up when we meet on the 1st, probably what would be good from your side leading up to the 1st of December, if you could put that input, and you can send it to the DJ and myself, to say, can this sector, the operators that you are talking about, can they be considered in the trusted employer scheme that we're currently doing for particular reasons, and motivate that, something that we could look at, CEO, certainly. How long the e-visa process depends on two things, Chair. Firstly, it's the stability of the system. I'm talking about enhancements. Secondly, is the availability of staff, which we are working on. The system stability, and I don't want to get to load shedding, Chair, but whenever there's load shedding, the systems restart and some of the information you lose, etc. But system stability is most important, not only from a power outage issue, but also within ourselves, the system we run, the dependency on CETA. Our target date is 5 days, our timeframes that we have on the e-visa system. Of course, once we have implemented the change request to have one adjudicator for visitors visas, that might even speed up more. So that is what we're working on. I just cannot give you the exact time frame now until we have stabilized, until we've done the enhancements, until we've done the change request, and until these 16 adjudicators that we have finished their shortlisting, the interviews today, until they're on board. If you ask me the question again mid-January, I can give you a better answer. But the target that we are trying to achieve is 5 days. Thank you.
I've diarized mid-January, Yusuf. I'm sure you'll have Chief knocking on your door. Thank you so much. Just to leave you with a parting comment, Yusuf, just a request from Aaron, who said to update on the training given to the immigration officials at arrivals, because they are critical in the seamless processing of passengers with e-visas. So I'm sure that is on your list, training for our immigration officers at arrivals with regards to passengers with e-visas. Right. Thank you so much for that. Next, I'd like to call on Nomsa, who is joining us from the Department of Tourism. She's the Director of National Public Transport Support, and it's Nomsa Mchwene. Nomsa, can you hear us?
Yes, Natalia, I can hear you.
Wonderful. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Natalia. Good afternoon, CEO. Good afternoon, the chairperson, and all the delegates on the platform. As indicated, my name is Nomsa Mchwene. I'm the Director NPTR Support, standing in for the DDG Public Transport. I think my task is easy, but I can see that the tempers have already risen there, you know, based on the challenges that operators have in as far as our work is concerned. But as a brief background, the NPTR is a statutory body that is established in terms of the National Land Transport Act of 2009, in particular Section 20. It was operationalized in 2016 after the legislation that establishes the NPTR was promulgated in 2009. So with that, you can tell that there were challenges from the beginning in as far as the NPTR is concerned. And when it was established, the NPTR was then tasked to first deal with the functions that have to do with the tourism industry, that is the receiving and processing of applications for operating licenses and the accreditation of tour operators in the tourism industry. When the NPTR started, it started with challenges because one, capacity on its own was an issue. There were very few people that were assigned to deal with the processing of those applications. And the structure of the department did not cater for the regulatory members that were supposed to consider these applications, which then meant that the department had to approach National Treasury to request funds to be able to appoint additional staff that can begin to process those applications. And that on its own resulted in the delays in the issuing of these operating licenses and accreditation. And over and above the challenge of capacity, the department had to rely on external people who came in on part-time basis to just come and consider the applications and leave the support staff to then process their decision. And with that arrangement, often than not, you find that the committee does not meet as often as possible to dispose the applications because you find that other members are not available and the committee does not form a quorum. The other challenge was that most of the work, in fact, it is still a challenge, that the system is not coherent and most of the NPTR work is manual. You can imagine in this day and age, if we're still doing things manually, it will obviously impact on the turnaround time by which we process these applications. And the other challenge was that there were different, or there are different interpretations in as far as the legislation is concerned, wherein you'd have operators arguing that the requirements are too onerous. You know, they need to be either reduced so that we can facilitate that ease of access. And then you find that most of those requirements are contained in the Principal Act as opposed to the regulations. And the previous speaker alluded to the fact that when things are contained in the in the Principal Act, the process of amending that is very long because we have to go through the parliamentary processes, as opposed to when you are dealing with regulations wherein the minister has the powers to amend the regulations. So with that, then we had to have these the delays and the backlog. The last issue again, which resulted in the backlog in the processing of this, was the prolonged absence of the NPTR and the COVID that came in. But we cannot solely put the blame on the COVID to say because of COVID, then we found ourselves in that situation. Like I said, the absence of the regulator also contributed. So with the situation, I think the industry got so frustrated in such that they even had to approach presidency to intervene and try and get these operating licenses out of the NPTR. And there was a delegation that was sent to the Department of Transport, which was led by the former Minister of Tourism, Mr. Derek Hanegom. They came, they met with the minister sometime in July. The outcome of that engagement was that a task team be set up that will look at addressing all the challenges that were identified and constantly monitor the progress in respect of the backlog, and also set a target to say by end of September, the committee must have disposed the backlog. So the task team was set up. It's led by the DDG, and internally the department then made provision for the regulator to meet as often as possible. I remember they were expected to meet 3 times in a week. for every week, there must be a sitting for them to sit and dispose those applications. And by end of September, they had concluded or considered those applications that were identified as a backlog, and even more, because when they started, a total of 1,014 applications was recorded as a backlog of applications. And then by end of September, they had already considered over 1,246 applications. So in those applications, I think they considered 1,246. And then of the 1,246, 1,019 applications were approved by the committee. And then 187 applications were postponed due to various reasons, which have been communicated to the affected operators. And then there were 40 applications that were were rejected. Whilst I'm reporting on the good work that was done by the regulator in terms of considering and taking decisions on the applications, when we look at the number of applications or operating licenses that have been uplifted today, you will realize that the uplifted applications does not match the number of approved licenses. And there are various reasons why that is the case, which often than not the industry would say, but it seems as if you are not telling us the truth when you say 1,019 has been approved and only 380 has been uplifted. When we did our internal investigation, we found that there are operators that have applied without having vehicles. They applied hoping to get approval, and once they get approval, they will then go and buy vehicles to come and uplift those licenses. You have a group of operators who then, because of the COVID, they were no longer able to pay for their vehicles, and then they were forced to sell them and exit the industry. So as a result, we've considered their applications, but unfortunately, they no longer have vehicles to come and uplift those licenses, because for you to uplift a license, you must have vehicle particulars that will be linked to this operating license. So others, they said they're no longer interested because they've sold their vehicles. And then we have a group that was requested to submit documents post-approval of their applications. And those documents in the main are your insurance documents, are your vehicle particulars, your COF, your annual license disc, you know, and then others, they were also requested to submit the vehicle registration certificate for us to be able to see that this vehicle is owned by this, there's that synergy, or there's that synergy between the applicant and the documents that have been submitted. And also to say, because of the time it has taken between the date of lodging the application and when the decision was taken, is the operator or the applicant servicing his or her vehicles? So they need to also submit vehicle, service records as proof that the vehicles are, you know, in a good state. It's been constantly serviced so that they don't put the tourist at risk. So we're having a challenge wherein operators are not submitting the documents that they are requested to submit. And then also, there are those applicants who have applied in a bulk, whom we classify them as large operators. You find that one operator has applied for 70 operating licenses, and those licenses have been approved. But when this operator comes for upliftment, he does not come with the 70 vehicles. He only comes with 5 vehicles and take it and pause. After a month or 2, he will then come with another 2. So you can imagine how many months it will take for us to reach that 70. So those are some of the reasons that make the upliftment to be slow, and that make the upliftment to be slow. And as a result, what was approved when compared to what is uplifted, they don't talk to each other. So as a result, what we have done from our side, because even the legislation requires us to send reminders to the applicants for them to come and uplift, what we have done, we have sent reminders to the applicants. We have called them telephonically. We have even couriered letters to the addresses that we have in our position, requesting them to come and uplift the licenses. Some have responded, and others have requested additional time for them to be able to go and purchase vehicles. And then others, they will tell us that they are on tour. Therefore, when they come back after 3 weeks or 5 weeks, it is then that they will package the documentation and send to us. So I've shared with you the challenges on the side of the operators to say they are not coming. That does not mean with us internally we do not have challenges. We also have challenges because the system that we are using is very slow. And that system is linked to SETA, wherein during the day, it becomes very slow. So people have to wait up until after 4 for them to be able to work on the system and print these licenses. So what the department has done, they then allowed people to work overtime and even weekends so that they can expedite the process of uplifting. But still, with that initiative, because of the documents that are coming in, and of which some of them are non-compliant, others are not certified, others, an operator will give you one document today and give you a document or 2 the next day. So it also impacts on the speed at which this backlog is finalized. So as a department, whilst we are trying from our side to engage with the operators, would even request the industry or even TBCSA to assist us in some instances where we can, on ways in which we can reach out to these operators for them to come and uplift the operating licenses. And I'm talking to the short-term interventions. There are those medium and long-term interventions, which, for example, are your amendments to legislation or even the regulations. The department has started with that. I was informed that consultation also has begun with the tourism industry on those areas that affect the tourism industry, in the main around your accreditation processes and the requirements. So that part is being dealt with by 8 different units within the department. And once that is done, that public consultation is completed, then they will then package the revised or amended regulations for the minister's signature. Natalia, I think I will stop there. In short, that is the update in as far as the processing of the application for operating licenses is concerned. Thank you very much. And my apologies that I did not have a PowerPoint presentation for you. You know, I was hired from another meeting to come and stand in for the DDG. Thank you very much.
No problem, no need for a PowerPoint. Thanks for that. And if you do have a question for NAMSA, please add that to the Q&A folder for me. I do see that there are some in the chat, and I will get to that. To that point, I had Lizelle ask the question, and I know I have personally received the question myself very often with regards to this backlog. And the tour operators are saying they haven't received any correspondence since 2019. So those 600 or 700 applications that have not reached the hands of those operators, how do we go about clearing that backlog? So that's my first question. And the second question, as you were speaking now, just as you ended off with regards to an implementation plan with the private and public sector consultation that's been developed by this ministerial task team. Is there a timeline for that implementation plan to be signed off by the minister so that it can be executed on? So I'll leave you with those two questions. And if there are any other questions, please feel free to throw that into the Q&A and I'll pose those to NAMSA. NAMSA, over to you.
Okay. Natalia, like I said, we have communicated the decisions to the operators, and I think now the onus is on the operators or the applicants themselves to submit the required information or documentation for the officials to, to finalize the upliftment process. However, those that say they have not had anything from the NPTR, they can write to me or even the officials. They have the email address that they lodge the applications on. They've got our contact details. They can write to us and raise issues to say, I have not had anything. And we do get those queries whereby a person says, I did receive a decision letter that says my application has been approved, but today I submitted the required documents, but to date, I have not had anything. Once I receive that or my colleagues receive that, we make a follow-up. We go to the front line and the back office staff and follow up and check as to what are the issues. In some instances, you would find that maybe the application went to a wrong place, or it's a human element, a person received this information and didn't do anything about that. And then we would act accordingly in that regard. But they need to bring that to our attention to say, I have not had anything. Why is there so much delay? What is happening on this one? And then we will give them what we call them, the reasons, if there are reasons. And I'm talking about those that their applications have already been approved. You will have those that their applications have not served before for the committee. And we will indicate to them that your application is still in the queue to be presented to the committee. And also, there's this issue whereby operators count the day or the number of days from when they submitted the documents, regardless of whether that application is complete or incomplete. Whereas on our side, an application is an application when it is given an application number. You would understand that if people are lodging applications via email, that application will go into the queue. They open them, on first come, first in, first out. They will open them, check this one, allocate the application, and then there'll be that interaction between an official and the applicant to say, we have received your application, but 2 documents are still outstanding. Please submit those documents. If there's a lapse of 2 weeks between that interaction, there's no application up until we receive the outstanding documents. And then when we receive that, it is then that we receive the application and allocate an application number. That's when the 60 days turnaround time begins. And then the operator will come and say, but no, I lost my application 6 months ago when he did not submit everything. So we would request operators to respond timeously on the request for additional documentation or information so that we can process their applications. And in as far as the implementation
plan.
The implementation plan, Natalia, it has been drafted in consultation with representatives of SADSA. And what has happened was that our principals then took that implementation plan, routed it to the minister for the minister's approval. So to date, it has not yet been approved. So I will be misguiding or misleading you to say these are the timeframes on that because it is not yet approved.
Okay, a couple more questions that have come in. And this is a very good, pertinent question. I know Chief also wanted to ask it, so I might be stealing his thunder from Michael. How can we avoid tourism vehicles being impounded or fined when they are driving legally on road because they have applied for their permit but not received it within the prescribed period? As you can imagine, Nomsa, when you've got a busload of tourists in and you've applied for your permit, but you haven't received it yet, and then you get pulled over, it doesn't leave a very good image of our country for the tourists who are sitting in that bus. Any perspective on that? Nomsa, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. We need to separate. There's a category of operators that were already holders of operating licenses, all right? And then there are those that did not have operating licenses at all. They're only applying for a new operating license. I'll confine my response to the ones that says they've applied on time, but they've not received their operating licenses, because those they are catered for in our regulation. Regulation 25 of the Act says any person that is a holder of an operating license that was issued more than 30 days ago must lodge an application 30 days prior to the expiry of that operating license. And should it happen that after the applicant has complied with that provision, lodged everything timeously, but still the regulator has not issued an operating license, that operator must take the receipt, which has got an application number, together with the expired OL, and keep it in the vehicle as proof that he had applied timeously. So for in case when they come across what you call the law enforcement officials, they show them that, Mina, I have complied, I have applied, but unfortunately the regulatory entity has not issued the operating license. So it has been brought to our attention through the task team that law enforcement officials are harassing operators on this, either because their lack of understanding, or because they don't want to recognize that receipt. And reason being that receipt, there's some wording that is written on that receipt that says this receipt does not authorize the conveyance of persons for reward. So they're saying you cannot show me this receipt which is written like this, you know. So what we have done as a department, there's an engagement between SAPS and RTMC to try and resolve that. And the task team also recommended that maybe the minister should consider an amnesty of some sort for those operators that have lodged their applications timeously and have not received the permit, so that, you know, by virtue of the letter that the minister would have issued, their vehicles are not impounded. That process is ongoing. There are engagements in between, and then I think they've roped in legal services to also look into that. So as and when we receive an update, we will then update operators as to where are we in that regard.
Okay, lots of questions for you, Nomsa, around operating procedures. So the online system, which is going to be introduced to fast track the application process to do away with human error, when will that online system be introduced?
I don't know when it will be live, but we are told by IT or people responsible for that system that the NPTR module is ready. But as you would know, with any other contract, you know, they are subject to be some challenges or disagreements. So there are side issues which the department is addressing with the developers of the system, but the module for the NPTR is there. Once they iron out all these other things, it can be then rolled out, and then we start receiving applications online.
Nomsa, in light of there being the challenges that you've mentioned, the systemic problems, the process being onerous, is there a reason why operating licenses are granted for 2 years when the Act allows for 7 years? Would it not help to relieve the bottleneck for you to extend those operating licenses for longer within the legal framework that is provided for it?
Okay, madam. With regards to the validity of an operating license, that is the space of the regulators themselves. The Act empowers them to decide on any period between 1 to 7 years. But I'm not sure as to whether you are aware that with the accreditation is for 5 years, all right? And when the accreditation is for 5 years, the argument for, you know, one of the reasoning, and I would be very cautious to speak on behalf of the regulator because I'm not mandated to speak on their behalf. But one of the things is that if you are not accredited as yet, they will give you, instead of saying, no, we're not giving you an operating license, they would say for minimum, we're giving this operator 2 years to go and operate and start putting systems in place so that he can then come and apply for accreditation, because the law says the minister must publish a date whereby no one will be allowed to operate within the tourism industry without being accredited. So, which means accreditation would come first and your operating license will be linked to your accreditation. And accreditation is 5 years, which then says, or the understanding says, the operating license for tourist transport operators will be for a maximum of 5 years, not go beyond the 5 years of the accreditation, because everything must be linked to this accreditation. It says you get accredited, and then when you get accredited, you surrender all the operating licenses that you have, wherein they will be set, your vehicles are going to be certified, they're going to reflect your accreditation number, you know, the operating license, and the decal that they're going to give you will reflect the accreditation number. So that means everything is linked to this accreditation. So you cannot have something that goes beyond the accreditation.
Sure.
And with that, if you have declared all your vehicles, the NPTR has certified all those vehicles. It means when you come and renew your accreditation, you bring everything, and then you'll renew once. You don't have to come back time and again to the NPTR. except when you decide to add to your fleet, where you buy a new vehicle, you will apply for a new operating license. And that operating license, if your accreditation is left with 2 years or is left with a year, they will then give you an operating license for 1 year, so that when you come back with everything. You don't have things that are outside the accreditation.
What about the situation where operators have submitted their documents correctly, but the documents have been lost within the department? So there seem to be a few process problems here. What happens to those vehicles? How can we allow them to drive legally in the situation where actually they've submitted their documents correctly, but because of process issues, those have now been lost?
Oh, you know, the cases where applications were lost, which I'm aware of, were those operators who came in to hand deliver their applications. And at that time, we had not yet opened for members of the public to access our offices. So they'll be expected to drop off their applications at a box which was provided for at a reception. So what happens, you find that there's a box for application for employment, there's an NPTR box. You find that the application has gone into the wrong box, and at a later stage, HR will then bring that application to us to say, we found this. And those that submit via the email, that email, it does not get full. We don't, we don't delete anything out of that email. So if a person does not hear from NPTR within 3 days or a week, the operator must contact the NPTR to say, I've submitted this, is it there? Because sometimes you would say it is lost, and only to find that maybe the volume of the documents that you have sent did not allow you, exceeded the required space or megabytes, I don't know, in IT lingo. So it has not gone through. So it's lying either in the inbox of the applicant or in between. So if you don't hear anything, you know, take the initiative and call and say, I've applied. Have you received my application? And if they say they haven't received, they will advise you to say, consider submitting the application in this format. Because the other thing with those that do not reach us if they were emailed is because you find that they've used the photographs instead of PDF. So the photos, they increase the size. But it's true that there are some applications that get lost within the department by virtue of the manual nature of our work, wherein an application changes hands from one official to another, you know. So hence I'm saying, if it's too quiet for your liking, it's a phone call away. And those operators that have contacted us, those that have contacted me, they will attest that we were able to assist them and track where the application is and process those applications.
Hence the need for an online system, Nomsa, because really for you guys to be processing things manually, whew, that's a lot of people and a lot of hands and a lot of human error in the mix.
Exactly.
And on the point with regards to, you know, just a phone call away, and I do appreciate the fact that you put your hand up and said, please contact us. But I know personally that deep frustration from wheels operators who say that they can't actually get through. Telephones are not answered. They go to voicemail. The email inbox might be there, but don't get a reply. So if it's too quiet for my liking, and I have tried to phone NOMSA and I've emailed and I'm getting absolutely no joy, how else can I communicate to make sure that I get a response?
All right. As in yesterday, we were considering a tender, or we were considering quotations. We are busy, or we are in a process of establishing a call center, wherein we will dedicate officials that will be solely assigned to work on the phones for NPTR. Yesterday, colleagues were considering those quotations, they've made recommendations, and from there, they will then identify people that will mend that call center.
Okay, we look forward to that.
Other than that, you know, when you are not happy with the officials, you come to NOMSA. When NOMSA is not helping you, you go to the next level, yeah, and then we will be able to assist you. And even with the assistance of TBCSA, if some of the things, when, like, for example, if they become aware of certain things that are not going right, they raise those things with our principals. We sit around the table, we discuss those things, we come up with a plan in terms of how we are going to resolve those. But there is that appetite to assist operators get their operating licenses.
Conscious that we are over time, so I'm going to do 2 more questions for you, Nomsa, and I'll let you go. And the first one is from Sean. I was asked to submit information the last 2 months, which I did. I was also told that all the required documents have been received. I then asked when my accreditation would be issued. I was told that they don't know when the Secretariat will be sitting again. So my question is, when will the Secretariat be sitting again?
Okay. The Secretariat does not sit. It is the committee that sits. And there's a planned meeting for the 9th of December, if I'm not mistaken. And there's also a push for them to have another last meeting just before the 23rd of the 23rd of December, you know. So they will be sitting then, and it depends as to whether that application is among those that will be considered, because what happens is you will have 300 applications that are ready for consideration, and only to find that during that period, over 2 days or 3 days, they are only able to consider 150, depending on the complexity of the application, because it's not like you say, here's an application, and then they just they debate, they deliberate on these applications before they decide to grant or not to grant.
Final question, and it leads back to the systemic problems and the challenges that you have been highlighting. You've got an implementation plan that's gone to the minister. Is it not an opportunity to establish some form of panel that can help you overall these operating procedures, which are making it really onerous for you to keep this process as simple as possible? Because for you to have committees sitting and approving things, and then, as you say, the volume of information that you're receiving that needs to be processed manually, it sounds to me like you need a fairly big overhaul to this entire process. Is there a plan to establish some form of team that helps you put those operating procedures in place, or what are the plans there?
Look, I said most of the procedures, we get them from the Act. Hence, I said earlier on, that's the challenge of having everything captured in legislation. Other than that, there are platforms wherein the committee itself meets with its counterparts from provinces, your provincial regulatory entities. They then try to standardize the procedures. They check what the legislation says, and then what would be the requirements, you know, things like that. And over and above that, through the engagement with the industry, with other government departments, that's where we get recommendation on how to best improve our processes. So I take it good. There are platforms that we are using which try to simplify the processes. Maybe within those platforms may have to beef up with other people, robbing in other people, or also if we can't get it, then we may have to consider getting external people that are paid to try and revamp our processes.
Thank you, Nomsa. Chief, I'd like to hand over to you if you have any questions or any last words.
Thank you, Natalia. I think the chair wanted to say something, then I can.
Then you'll close off. Chair, over to you.
No, thanks, Natalia. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for participation, but also to encourage our members who are here to keep those questions coming, because we've scheduled a meeting with the Deputy DG tomorrow, and NOMSA will be in that meeting as well. In the meeting, it will be myself, Chief, Ian, Michelle, as well as Tinswalo from SATSA. So don't stop at this, send the questions to Chief so that we can carry on with this discussion. But also, Chief, I think what I'd like us to do is to have a one-on-one with Yosef, because he raised some critical issues there that needs to be followed up to make sure that we don't fall behind. But just wanted to say thank you, and let's keep on going with these kind of debates. They're not easy, but you know, the more we do this, the more we get to know each other's pains. And we're not going to stop at that at this. We have an obligation to recover as a sector and to re-employ those people that we retrenched as various companies during COVID. So we're not going to stop at this. But thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And over to you, Natalia and Chief.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Natalia. I just want to say there's a few things that we're going to be doing. I know that there's a concern about, and it's a big concern about the impounding of vehicles, and the fact that, you know, that ruins the experience of the tourist, and, you know, it's an embarrassment when we are, you know, doing what we do best. So there are a couple of things that we're also embarking on, in addition to what the chairman have said. We have started approaching the provincial departments of transport to see if they can write letters to the traffic officials within the department to make sure that you know, the impounding of the vehicles you know, is stopped, especially for those that have applied for the permits. They have the receipt, they are waiting for their permits to be considered, and they are going about their business, and they've got the other requirements in terms of the roadworthiness and many other things. So I've started the discussion. I've spoken to the Limpopo provincial government to see if they can help us. There seem to be appetite. I will be talking to the Mpumalanga provincial government to see if, you know, they've got appetite. I think they would have appetite. And if we can get that before, you know, the festive season starts, that's going to help us to reduce, you know, the impoundment of our vehicles on the road. So that work is also underway. And we are hopeful that we will get that across the line. And we should have the provincial departments, you know, issuing those notices to their traffic. And of course, we still need to deal with the National Traffic Police to make sure that, you know, there is alignment. But if we can get some wins with the provinces, we'll be able to sort of mitigate the problems that we have. So that is some of the things that we're doing. And of course, from the Home Affairs side, we will follow up. There are a few things that are quite critical. And there are developments that are coming through. When we have another session, we will definitely, you know, be following up. The last thing on our discussion is that we will have the leadership conference next year, and we will have it from the 13th to the 15th of September 2023. So you can diarize that. These discussions will lead to the conference to say, this is what we discussed in the previous year. These are the things that we've done. And of course, there's always going to be new challenges. We'll discuss the new challenges and also discuss the implementation towards the 2030 strategy and what are the new things that we need to be thinking about going forward. So there will be a conference next year from the 13th to the 15th of September 2023. Most likely it's going to be at the same place so that we can contain the crowd at the same place over 3 days. And it's going to be improved. It's going to be turbocharged. There's going to be international, content attached to it. We are planning early, and we'll love everyone to participate. So that's what we have at the moment, but we haven't finalized the venue. We'll tell you the venue when we've booked it, and we'll announce it through the appropriate channels. So I'm just giving you the teaser as the people that have attended the conference. I know there's media here. We'll do the media release when we are ready, but we are planning to have a conference next year. Thank you so much for participation. Thank you, Natalia, for always coming through. Thank you, Nomsa, for your time. We do understand that there are things that you can do, cannot do, and there are things that we need to do from our side, hence the meetings that we're going to be having. But thank you very much, and we really appreciate it, and thank you for those that have participated. Over to you, Natalia.
Thank you, Chief. I do love your optimism, controlling the tourism crowd. I'm going to keep that here. Everybody, have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you for joining us. And you heard Chief. If you have any questions, please direct those through to the Tourism Business Council of South Africa. We'd love to hear from you, and thank you everybody for your time today, especially to Nomsa and Yusuf for giving us your feedback. Have a great evening, everyone. See you next time. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks,
Bye.
Nams. Thanks.